Well, Samir, welcome.
Thanks, man. How's it going?
It's going well. I'm really excited to be here. I'll start by giving a little bit of background on me, on Samir, and a little bit on AI in general, just broader picture stuff, and then we'll jump into it.
Sounds good.
So I'm a director of product and AI engineering at Real Chemistry. My team develops all sorts of algorithms, but then puts them into actual products that impact the healthcare industry. We have multiple startups within Real Chemistry. One is IPM.ai that identifies undiagnosed or misdiagnosed patients. We have Conversation Health, which is a conversational AI chatbot that helps healthcare professionals get to the right answers. We have Swoop and TI Health, which we recently acquired, that help with targeting. So a whole bunch of really exciting stuff. And Real Chemistry as a broader org brings data and AI and ideas to healthcare companies, such as our client, AbbVie. So that's a little bit about me. I want to talk a bit about you, Samir, first. As an employee of AbbVie, I do want to say that, put this on the record, you're here under your own professional capacity as a healthcare leader. All viewpoints are yours. They're not AbbVie's. And that's the same for me on this podcast, at least. So, Samir, you're a commercial healthcare leader with over a decade of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. You've launched multiple drugs from cardiovascular to gastro, psychiatry, and currently neuroscience. Before joining the pharmaceutical industry, you were a tech consultant, and you worked as a biomedical flight controller.
Yep.
Before we jump into generative AI, I know you love aviation. You're an avid aviator. You still do?
I do, yeah. I still fly.
So how did that start? And yeah, how does that impact your day-to-day?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. First, thanks for inviting me to be here on the podcast and have a conversation about generative AI. I've flown now, so my daughter is 7, so I've been flying for 7 years. And I got into flying. I was always really interested in flying for a long time, but never had the means or the time to do it until my wife was about 5 months pregnant. And so when she was 5 months pregnant, I said, this is a perfect time to get in a plane and learn how to fly because I'll never get the opportunity to do it again. And she thought I was crazy. But it all worked out. And I am in a partnership with 2 other guys, and we own a plane. And it's great. It's like a time machine. So you can take it to get from here to Boston in like New Jersey to Boston in like 2 hours versus like the 6-hour drive that it can be sometimes. And so it's a humbling experience. And I enjoy it a lot because when you're up there at 8,000, 10,000 feet, it's kind of very peaceful. And it's kind of like my wife calls it my yoga and says that because you're so focused on one task, you don't have anything else coming at you. And so it's been a joy, honestly.
Yeah, I play a lot of tennis. It's a whole lot less exciting, but I get the same feeling.
But you're like a professional tennis player, though, aren't you? Like you're very good.
Let's focus on the generative AI stuff. So before diving into generative AI too far, I want to just point out a few definitions of AI, machine learning, deep learning, just to get everyone kind of a common understanding. I can't cover everything, but AI overall is a very, very broad field that's very exciting, but it combines computer science, big data, mathematics, statistics to do predictive things. So machine learning is that machine component of bringing that intelligence from statistics using historical data to predict things. And so generative AI uses deep learning, a subfield of machine learning, and it's based on large language models. So they use a whole lot of language, a whole lot of data to predict and generate new content. It learns from one sequence to produce another sequence. So sequence to sequence is what we refer to a lot, but it can be sequence to pixels, which then create pictures, or a sequence to just one word or to something else. So it's that breaking language into components and then using historical data and trained models to produce an output. ChatGPT, which we will talk about, is a form of generative AI. There are others. DALL-E for images. Microsoft's coming up with new stuff, and more new stuff will keep coming out. GPT-4 will come out very, very soon.
Tuesday, I think. Right?
Perhaps. We'll see when Microsoft comes out with it. But it's an exciting field, exciting moment, and I think I want to bring up why it's exciting today. I think it's that the general public, for the first time, is seeing and interacting with AI. and the outputs are very high quality outputs, and that's very exciting. It's not a new field. So it's not like generative AI just dropped and it just worked and people get excited. No, it's been around, it's been worked on for years, but the general public has access to it for the first time. And so do corporations. And I guess that's what we'll talk about here in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I actually used ChatGPT to try to come up with creative questions. And I'll say I didn't succeed, or it didn't succeed. So all the questions are mine.
That's good because you work for also a creative agency, right? So you should be able to generate creative ideas.
So we still have a need for creative people to come up with creative questions. I pushed it a little bit, and I got a bunch of rhyming things that weren't very exciting, but you got words like pickle and nickel, and it kept on rhyming and rhyming, but nothing creative that was any good. So I guess the first question is the title of this podcast, Generative AI, oh God, what now? So where are we today, Samir? Where are we for you as a brand manager? Where do you think we're going?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, right? And so you want to be careful to think of that, is this a fad, or is this something that's actually meaningful in the industry that we can leverage and be able to provide more value to patients or to our customers and HCPs? And I think that this is not a fad, right? I've had the privilege of attending a couple talks here at South by and just hearing kind of the ideas that are being generated. It's really exciting, right? It's kind of like, and I think the founder of OpenAI said this. It's kind of like an iPhone moment, right? In tech, in terms of what we're doing. Like we're just at the precipice of what we can leverage today for generative AI and provide a lot of value for patients. So, are we using it today in healthcare or in the pharmaceutical industry? I think we're dabbling, at least from a marketing perspective. And I know that in like med affairs and clinical trials and whatnot, there are AI models being leveraged in analytics, but it's not necessarily the generative AI models. And so there's a lot of opportunity. And so I don't think this is a fad, and I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. I think it's the right way to do it too. It's just explore, be excited about it, have fun with it. But don't just jump into it saying we're now doing generative AI and everything needs to be generative AI or everything needs to be AI. You need to solve business problems first. Mm-hmm. You're a healthcare company that needs to serve its patients and healthcare providers, and that should be the first focus. Generative AI and AI as a whole can help there, but it's not a must all the time. I think the way we look at it is, how do we maximize learning? How do we make people smarter in the first place? And then how do we identify some inefficiencies, some little things here and there within a process that can be improved with the help of AI and data. So what do you think some of the limitations are of generative AI today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of limitations, right? I think it's no secret right now in terms of these early AI models that are out there is in terms of accuracy, right? And so we've talked about that multiple times. And so for a large manufacturer, that's risky, right? If you have inaccuracy and accurate information, are you going to be able to share that with patients and with clinicians? And those are things that need to be considered, especially in kind of a risk-adverse environment that large manufacturers are a part of. And so that's one area that I think of. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think there is risk. It's super exciting, but there is massive risk. And so understanding the cost of being wrong is a key component of what each brand needs to do. So besides just like broad generative AI and the limitations, where do you see the biggest risk for you as a pharmaceutical brand?
Yeah, and so talking about data inaccuracies, right? I think quality control is a big area that we need to be aware of. And so if we were asking a generative AI model some questions and we have kind of garbage in, you're going to get garbage out,
yep.
Right? And so whenever we're building out these AI models to either help us from a process standpoint or help us from a communication standpoint, we have to be concerned and thoughtful of what information is going into that model. And so, today we've been talking a lot about, you and I have talked a lot about equity also in terms of the data gathering that we are able to do in clinical trials and whatnot. And so as it's kind of, what I like about generative AI is that it takes structured data that we have, and it also takes unstructured data. So when you look at like PowerPoints and whatnot, you kind of put all this information together as a database that we can leverage to be able to cull information and insights. But my point earlier is that if you have garbage in and you're not thoughtful of the approach of the demographics, the patient populations, and what we're doing, you're going to get garbage out. And so that's something that we just need to be cognizant of as an industry.
I think it's super important. So biases exist in humans in the first place.
Yeah.
Biases exist in the data, and biases exist in our models, and so there is a huge risk there in general. And then there's other things with challenges with generative AI. I think it lacks common sense. It's very good at a lot of stuff, but it lacks common sense. And I'll kind of give two examples, but if you learn to drive, and you learn to drive here in Austin, Texas, or rural Texas or Oklahoma, and I dropped you off in New York, you'd still know how to drive. You may have to adapt to your environment. You may have to adapt to New Yorkers. They're a bit more
Pedestrians, you're gonna honk at.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you can grab your skills that you've developed on the road here and plug them into a different environment in New York and do fairly well. AI cannot really do that today. There's solutions to it. There's a lot of transfer learning. That's a process of AI that's being worked on. But really, you'd need to learn to drive again in New York from scratch. And I think that's the big gap there. And so that has limitations. You need to train it on every possible situation, every possible types of patients, every possible new kind of part of the world, new environment. And that creates challenges, inequity especially.
Yeah.
Another component is, I guess, the math side. It's not super good at logic. Sometimes it does well, but it often messes up pretty simple logical stuff. So I was playing around with some of it last night. Some quick math. You asked it, hey, look, how many toes do 5 people have? Pretty straight answer, 50 roughly, right? And it struggles with it. Then if I do explain, and I say, look, people have 10 toes. So how many toes would 5 people have? You'd get 50. So it gets there, right? You need to kind of help it on the way there. But if I make it slightly more complex, I say that every other person has 11 toes. It gets so confused, right? And so every time I add just a little bit of complexity that to us seems pretty straightforward, pretty common sense stuff, it gets lost. And again, it would need to get trained on a whole lot of examples of common sense stuff that it cannot transfer today. That's a big limitation there for ChatGPT-like technology.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So you're saying it's kind of like my 6-year-old or 6 or 7-year-old, and they just kind of,
It does
still young.
It does certain things probably much better than your 6-year-old. Okay. But there's a whole lot of things that it can't do that your 6-year-old can do very, very well.
I don't know. We'll talk about that after. So we'll see.
So,
one other thing I want to talk about in terms of limitations, real quick, was ethical and legal considerations.
Yeah.
And so when we think about, like we partner with Real Chemistry or other agency partners. Let's use an example like CRM, right? And so we have patients that sign up on brand.com, and we want to communicate with them and speak with them. We work with agencies to help develop that content, right? And we pay for IP, we pay for the copy and for the ideas that are being generated, and then that is being communicated to patients. If we were to leverage a ChatGPT tool or generative AI tool, the question would be like, well, who gets paid for that? Is that copyright infringement? And so what's going to go on? Like, these are all questions I think that we've talked about here at South by and in general. But those are real considerations that a manufacturer needs to consider because, as I said earlier, we're a risk-averse company, right? There's a lot of eyeballs on pharma, and we're able to make sure that we're able to be appropriately providing the right content and also paying the right people to be able to generate that content.
Yeah, totally. I think that what's the cost of being wrong? And I think that's just a hard question right now, and everything is new. There's a bunch of lawsuits everywhere. I'm not going to discuss them, but yes, there are legal implications. And compliance is an important piece of picking a good vendor, picking a good partner, transparency, compliance, and then just a taught approach to the legal components of it.
Yeah.
So Samir, let's try to project yourself in the future. Not too far, right? We're not going to 2050. We're close enough. 2025, 2026. We're back here at South by Southwest, and we're having a conversation about generative AI. Where do you think it has been applied in the healthcare world, in your world specifically?
Yeah, I'm glad we can get the boring risk stuff out of the way, right? And focus on the pie in the sky, which I think is we talk a lot about in terms of what are the great applications that we can do. And I think it's limitless right now. I think we're just at the precipice of what we can do with it. And so I'll provide a couple examples that I've been thinking about that are more tangible. in terms of like how I would want to consider it for a brand, at any pharmaceutical manufacturer. So, when we think about pharmaceutical marketing, it's you're looking at HCP promotion, you're looking at DTC promotion, you're looking at payer promotion, and you're looking at sales, right? We have like anywhere between 200 to 800 sales reps for a specific brand. And so, when I think of creative development, my job or my team's job is to develop a brief, right? We want to come up with an idea, give that brief to our agency partners, and our agency partners are then going to kind of run with that and do tissue sessions and come up with a couple creative ideas. How do you augment that with, generative AI? How do you come up with 500 ideas instead of 150 ideas and make them all really on brief and be able to leverage that to be able to come up with, a strategy and a plan to test and learn and then, refine our ideas that we want to go forward with. And so that's something that I think is really exciting that we can do as a brand team and partnership in conjunction with our agency partners.
I like the word you used there, augmentation, right? Really empowering people to do their creative work better.
I don't think it's taking any creative jobs. I think it's going to help. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it might take some, but really the focus is that more creative output will be generated. And I think that's what's really exciting. You get that more outputs. Now, as we create more outputs, processes might change. How do you see this impact the current process and future processes?
Yeah, I mean, processes, in a company such as, J&J or AbbVie or what have you, there are a lot of processes, right, in big pharma. And so one of the main processes that we all have is our medical, legal, compliance, regulatory review. And, those are great partners that I've worked with in the past. But there is a large volume of assets that we want to be able to get to market, right? So if we're coming up with a launch of an indication or a launch of a new product, we're up for probably 100 straight hours with these partners on Zooms during the pandemic to be able to approve all these assets to come to market. And so what if you could train a model that would really be able to learn what we've done for the last 500, 1,000, 10,000 assets over the last year that learns regulatory compliance, legal, and then can triage the output, right? And so if you can triage the output high, medium, low risk, then you leverage your team members at a much faster pace, right? And you can get assets approved much more quickly because we've built a model that is meaningful in terms of an internal process that can get us output to our customers and our providers at a much more rapid pace. And so that's something I'm really excited about from just an internal process standpoint.
No, I agree. I think what I'm expecting is that we're seeing a lot of Lego-like building blocks. And one AI is one piece of that. And then you have other tech. Your iPhone is a Lego block, and then the Photoshop is another one. But people are as well, right? And people and tech and AI and multiple sources of generative AI and non-generative AI will be connected and interconnected and rearranged constantly to create a complete new process. And I think that's what's exciting. It's not just like we're enhancing and augmenting a current process. We'll have the ability to change processes and have feedback loops that are much, much quicker, resulting in better output and more output.
Yeah, absolutely.
And reaching your business goals and adding value through enhanced processes and new processes. So I think that's what I'm really excited about. I see that the connection of multiple bits and pieces of AI throughout the journey to provide quicker feedback loops for decision making, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about decision making, and so I'm gonna go back to another example that is more externally facing. And so when you think of like a sales field, like Salesforce, right? And so whether you have a sales force of let's just say 600 sales reps, right? We have teams that sometimes have sales reps that have 20-year veterans, right? And then we have the same team might have somebody that just joined pharmaceutical sales maybe less than a year ago and doesn't have any pharmaceutical sales experience. So how do you elevate the normal curve of sales reps and get the tail to be just as high as the top part of it to understand the data they're looking at? Like what's a TRX, NBRX, NRX? How do you ask the questions when you're going into a provider and be at the same level as a 20-year veteran to know what questions to ask? Now, obviously that'll take time on the rep standpoint, but at least we can elevate their game. We can elevate their questions. And I think to me, that's really compelling as a real world application that could happen pretty quickly because it can generative AI can ingest all that data and then can develop these questions and comments for a rep before they go in and they pre-call plan when they're getting ready to go to a provider's office.
Yeah, funny you say that. We recently acquired a company called Conversation Health.
Oh, I set you up there really well, didn't I?
Didn't you? You're right. I think it's it's not replacing reps, it's really helping them with data and AI to augment their game so that they're
Right.
ready. And also being very much more precise in the way they talk to, healthcare professionals and physicians.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, to win more there.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I think about, like when I'm currently in the sales role right now at AbbVie, and it's been a wonderful learning experience. And when I think about like what we're trying to do in terms of coaching, like my job right now is to coach 9 reps and try to make them the best possible versions of themselves, right? And so they're all vary widely in terms of their skill sets, but they're all very good at what they do. But how do I find the best version of them? And so there are field reports that are done for the last several years on these individuals. There is performance reviews. There is their objective output that they've been able to provide. And so again, this goes back to the idea of structured and unstructured data, right? So like field coaching reports, performance reports are all unstructured data. And then you have outputs that are structured in terms of like what their goal attainment is and et cetera. And how do you take all this information, because it takes some of the best teams to sit down and managers to look at all this information and be able to cull kind of certain different insights, right? But if you can leverage generative AI to say, tell me what the top 3 reps in the country are doing, and it's taking across every single piece of data that it has and providing those top insights, that's meaningful as a sales leader and as a marketing leader. Because then how do you take that and replicate that across the entire team?
No, that makes sense. And again, I'm not going to try to solve problems here, but we do have solutions there, and I think it's feasible.
Yeah.
And it's the exciting path forward. So imagine you're saying few years down the road, generative AI and AI in general continues to be enhanced, and how do you pick a good vendor? How do you pick a good partner? Who do you work with? What are your expectations from vendors, partners in this space?
Yeah, I think like when you're looking up, when you're trying to find the best partner to work with that is at the forefront of the technology, right? Is writing white papers, is kind of out there and being able to provide real world examples of how they're taking kind of the latest technology and being able to applying it in terms of what they're doing. And like, it's actually real. It's not theoretical. It's actually been done. I think that's important, right? And if you're able to do that, that kind of brings you right up to the top. Now, when ChatGPT or generative AI, it's so new. So you haven't been able to do that yet, right? Mm-hmm. And so then it's saying, okay, where have you been able to take it internally and been able to leverage it? And I know like Rad Science or Part of Real Chemistry has done a lot of interesting work with creative mechanism of action videos, right? And I've worked with you guys on that, and so that's been really compelling.
No, I agree. I think the few things, like there's 3 big things that I would look for if I were you. It's that the company is problem focused first, solving problem, adding business value, and not just theoretical AI, not just like white paper. I mean, those are important, but it's applying AI to actual business problems.
Sure.
So business focused, and then having the ability to integrate. I was just talking about building blocks that fit into a process. Well, that's really hard. And so you want a company that can integrate within your current processes and help you build new flows and have technology and people integrate with new up and coming tech. And then finally, you brought this up quite a few times already, but the governance aspect of it, which is challenging, right? The legal, the compliance, the transparency, making sure your vendor and your partner has best practices, thinks about equity, and ethical decision-making throughout the process.
Yeah.
So we've touched on improvements, we've touched on processes, we've touched on where we are today and where we might be going in the next few years. I think a big part of it too, and people might be interested about this, is the people aspect of it. How do we hire and recruit people within your org or broader organizations with skills that will be relevant within an AI world?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I'm going to throw it back to you because I know I'm not the moderator, but anyway, what do you think are the skills? I mean, you're the AI expert, so what are the specific skill sets that you'd be looking for to build out a team to be able to help develop these generative AI models that will help you from a copy standpoint and a creative standpoint?
I think it's hard to know exactly, but what I can say is there's a few things, a few skills that will not be in demand, and then there's a few things not to do, I think, in the future. I think, and this has been a trend since the digital age, perhaps, right? But people have to be entrepreneurial, open-minded, curious. And I think every company has been hiring for that, for open-minded folks that are willing to try new things. But that will only be pushed forward more and more and more at a faster pace with new technology. And so people that aren't willing to embrace it are just going to fall off. So you really need that. I think the other piece is when you think of a large language model, there is mathematics, there is big data, technology, but there's also linguistics, right? There's an understanding of broader areas of sociology and philosophy. And so I actually think we're going to see expert in all these different fields, biology, chemistry, physics, linguistics, et cetera, get together much more so and think about very small, narrow problems as well as much bigger societal problems, as you mentioned earlier, equity in general. So those are the things that I think we'll see a lot of. Any tasks today, I do think, that can be done in seconds are at risk. And then any tasks today that can, if your job is the exact same every hour and every day, if there's no change, if it's extremely repeatable, you're probably at risk. But you can be augmented and you can transfer. There will be a whole lot of new jobs, right? People writing prompts, people reading outputs, people validating and classifying AI outputs to improve AI over time. Right? So like new jobs, new roles, new skills will be developed as well within this journey. So it's not just but it's unclear today what the exact mix and bag of successful employees will look like. But I think open-minded folks that are willing to take risks and work with others.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, right? And I think when we're hiring today for folks that are on brand teams, sales teams, payer teams, et cetera, it is exactly that. Open-minded, being willing to try new things, willing to take risks, because to be able to be successful with technologies such as generative AI in an organization, you need change agents, right? And as cliche as that sounds, it's still true. So you need people that are willing to be able to put their neck out on the line, to be able to show the value of what technology or what these things are going to do and what they can bring to the organization. And so if you hire that for the right profile, then like all tides rise.
Agreed. Another thing to think about there is if it doesn't cost much or anything to fail at your job, right? So if we're trying an experiment and there is no cost at failing that experiment, I think that's where AI can really have a big impact. So usually there is a risk, right? Even if you put out one tweet, there's a risk. A poor tweet can have a horrible impact on your reputation, but anywhere else throughout any job. But if there's very little cost at being wrong, that's something AI can really come in, because it can experiment and put out a bunch of outputs at no cost of reputational cost or process cost. And so that's something to look out for as well.
Yeah.
The cost of being wrong, again, is a big part of this.
Right.
Alrighty, Samir. So, just for fun here, what are some of the most creative use cases that you've seen within generative AI?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I'd love to hear from the audience too at some point when we do the Q&A session, because it's such an interesting space. I would say what I stumbled upon, I actually was speaking to a friend recently, and the most interesting case that I heard of, and I saw it on Amazon, is there's a physician, and I don't know if you guys have heard about this yet, but there's a physician who uses ChatGPT, and he says 101 things of like asthma, or 101 things of diabetes, or 101 things of Crohn's disease. And ChatGPT spits out like all this content. He's a physician, so he's been able to take it, he edits it to make sure it's validated for accuracy, and then he publishes it within 72 hours on Amazon. And so that's like literally over the last 3 weeks, I think. And so if you think about that opportunity, like, and the creator economy, like there's so much opportunity, right? I didn't even think about that as an output, but there's so many different things that we haven't thought about yet that can really generate a lot of value for patients, for consumers, and that's just one of the ones that I recently saw.
No, that's interesting, and it's a great idea. I think there's a few important parts of that too, right? One, he is a physician. He's not some.
He's a credible.
He's not a Twitter employee that's canceling stuff. So he's a physician. He's reviewing the outputs. I think that's a massive piece too, right? He's not just outputting 101 things. He's reviewing them, and then it's looking back at stuff that's being documented that exists already. He's not putting out new theories on X, Y, or Z. He's looking at the past and summarizing retrospectively summarizing things. That's a great application today. We're working on some image, like sequence to image, sequence to pixel stuff. That's really, really exciting, I think, just creating new images. The big thing there is, without existing imagery archives, it's hard to build new stuff that's relevant and accurate. And again, you talked about this earlier, but the accuracy of images are important in certain fields. And so we have a team within Real Chemistry, Rat Science, and they've done a phenomenal job over the past 15 years at making and producing medical imaging. And those medical images can now be used, and we can train our own models to produce new outputs. And that's super exciting, to very quickly get quick sketches of new stuff and empower our clients that way.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we talked about in terms of like how do you provide impact and value to a brand, like a brand team, right? Is being able to provide a wide variety of options in terms of what we're trying to accomplish to be able to tell a story. And so if you can use that to augment the creative team to be able to provide all these different images, I mean, that's extremely valuable.
Exactly. Like you're really augmented, you're getting to market quicker, and you're creating a bunch of outputs that can be reviewed. They're not perfect. The goal isn't for them to be perfect, but they can really enhance the whole flow. So what are you most excited about generative AI today? You're sitting here, we're talking about it, but what's most exciting for you?
Yeah, I think this is more pie in the sky, right? In terms of what we could have, and we're literally at the precipice, right? It's I know that ChatGPT is like a year and a half, 2 years old in terms of like when they built out their model. The new ChatGPT 4 is coming out on Tuesday, I think, which is more multimodal, and so you can leverage, and you can speak to this way more better than I can, but you can actually across chat, across imagery, and so there is so much opportunity that we can leverage as people to like be better educated, be better conversing, be able to talk more about topics that we just don't know about and that we're interested and curious about. I mean, I think just using this as a tool as self-education is actually really promising. Like I literally used it also for my daughter's science project like a week and a half ago. How do you explain like this science project to like a 6-year-old? And it kind of goes through this process, and it's like it's awesome. It's really great.
What I'm really excited about within healthcare is I think of any healthcare professional, it being, a pharmacist wants to spend more time with the patient, explaining how they should take the drug, and they want to spend less time on things that are insurance related or just a painful little task. And same with the physician. We know the outcomes are so much better for patients with every additional minute they can spend with the physician. And I think this can really augment that journey.
Yeah, I mean, there's already physicians doing it today, right? Like I have friends that are using it to write their prior auth letters, to write their medical necessity letters. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just scratching the surface, but there's so much opportunity.
So much opportunity, lots of excitement. Well, Samir, thanks. This was fun. This is a good chat.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.